Do you ever have people that just come over to your house unannounced, or people that will hit you up and ask you for money? Well, this week on The Thinking Effect, we're going to talk about setting boundaries. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Tommy Danger, and this is The Thinking Effect, where we help you do your daily best. As always, please like, subscribe, and share. I know I've been a little MIA for a minute. I've been promoting my latest musical release, Mac V2, Motivation and Confidence Volume 2, which is out now. Shameless plug. Had to make sure that some things were aligned with that project so I can get it up and running. So I missed you guys, and I'm happy to keep the ball rolling and keeping things going strong. You know, we've done some housekeeping. You know, we now have the rebranding, because we started out as Motivation and Confidence, but we changed to Thinking Effect. So we have the web domain, thinkingeffect.net. We have that now. As you know, also, we used to use the DISC assessment, but we've since changed to the flight assessment. And if you don't know what the DISC assessment or the flight assessment is, it is a personality assessment that we use to help you determine what your natural gift is, and it also gives you insight into what your strengths are and what are some blind spots that you might not be aware of. And I know a few of you have reached out to me to get your assessment, and it took a while for me to get back to you. New system, glitches, no automatic notifications. I'm a little lazy. I should have went in the system and checked, so I apologize for getting back to you tardy on that. But for those of you who did reach out, you should have your personalized video response that I sent back with a copy of the assessment. If this is something that you're interested in, and I highly recommend it because it has helped to change my life in the past 3 years. You know, just hit me in the link, and I can send you. It's actually going to be in the flow code link that's within the notes or comments, show notes of the podcast, so you could check that out. But I did a survey on Instagram because I always like to talk about things that you guys find interesting. So I had 3 different subjects, and one was, should I rant? Should I talk about setting boundaries? Or, just generic motivation. And the majority ruled setting boundaries, even though it was close to rant also. So setting boundaries and doing my research is primarily in 5 areas, right? So you have physical boundaries, you have sexual boundaries, intellectual boundaries, emotional boundaries, and financial boundaries. And when you think about boundaries, think about how boundaries were set for you as a kid. Now, I know that in New York, when it comes to physical boundaries, even though New York is crowded, we all like to have this much space around us. 360, we want this much space. And when you get, in certain areas, that invisible circle that's around you disappears. And at times it can feel a bit overwhelming, especially after coming out of the pandemic, where we had the whole 6-foot rule, and now people just disregard it. And if you're on the subway, for those of people who ride the trains, you know how that is. They don't regard that. So that's just what that is. So when it comes to setting physical boundaries, you have to be clear. And some people don't really believe in physical boundaries. Some people just believe in occupying space, but if you are the type of individual where you value your personal space, you have to speak up about it. You have to be consistent about it. You have to be clear. I think a good example that I used to, or that I learned when I used to be in the office, is when people like to touch you, right? Some people, they just, they, oh, put their hand on your shoulder. And sometimes some of you prefer not to say anything to the other person because you're so afraid of hurting their feelings. And in the process of you being concerned for not hurting another person's feelings, you are doing internal damage to yourself because you know that you don't feel comfortable. So you have to ask yourself, what is it about having a conversation with the person to say, I prefer if you don't touch me in that way, bothers you? Is it because you think that the person is going to look at you strange? Do you think that the person's going to say, like, what's wrong with you? And even in that scenario, if they were to say that, there's nothing wrong with you stating your case. There's nothing wrong with you stating your case. You can say, I just prefer for people not to touch me. And if it's something that they go on and on about, that is another set of boundaries into your emotional boundaries that you do not have to partake in. It's like saying no is no. And I think, for me, I had to learn, I would say the hard way, because I've learned from taking the assessment that people perceive me as being a bit aggressive, even though I would challenge that, because I think most Black men are automatically labeled as aggressive if they speak with authority. If we use a higher tone, we're automatically seen as aggressive. So, as I like to explain to my children, I am speaking with passion. When I'm speaking up towards something, I'm speaking with passion. And if I'm ever out in public, and for those of the people who know me, like when I'm walking up and down the street, I don't like people like close to me at all. Like, I will switch sides on the sidewalk. Like, I just don't feel comfortable with people being that close to me. And for people who may say like, oh, well, this guy's a little weird, that's fine. If people want to label me in a particular way because I am clear on setting my boundaries, I'm totally fine with that. I'm grown, and I'm not worried about people calling me names, because sticks and stones, the rest, as my grandmother taught me. And that level of consistency always remains, even with like certain trains and stuff. Like if a train pulls into the station and it's crowded, like I'll just wait for the next train. I think more recently, the family and I, we took a little weekend trip to Mohegan Sun. And I noticed that, just being totally transparent, I noticed that if my family and I were waiting to get on the elevator, and if another family was there, it was almost like, okay, who's going to go in first and wait for the next elevator? And maybe it's because we're closed in, so some people wouldn't get on the elevator if we got on. And, sometimes, well, for a second, I was like, well, maybe they're doing that because we Black. Like, they don't want to get in the elevator with us, right? But then I really had to think about it and say, you know what? We as a family, like, we did not want people super close to us. Maybe because it's like certain environments that are somewhat confined, that's the way that it is. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with you setting your boundaries, especially if you feel as if it's a healthy boundary. And another type of boundary that I want to talk about, especially going into the holidays, is financial boundaries. You'll get so many people that will hit you up and ask for money or ask for favors, and you have to draw the line. You have to draw the line. People will use you as long as you allow them to use you. As long as if you're like the ATM to everybody else, it's like you're the coolest person in the world. And again, certain people have asked me for money. If I'm kind enough to give it to you once, if I'm kind enough to give it to you twice, that's it. If I tell you that there's no more, then there's no more. I don't owe you a reason. I don't care how well I'm doing for myself. If you have the will to get up and work and you're not disabled and nothing's wrong with you, then as an adult, I would expect for you to do the exact same thing. It is not my responsibility to care for another individual that has the ability to do for themselves. And that also goes with kids. You know, sometimes our kids, we as parents, we want to give them just because we may think that when we were children, there were certain things that we weren't able to afford. So we automatically give them things without the merit, just because we can do it. And that actually sends the wrong message, because things need to be earned, not because we have some sort of childhood trauma that we have not resolved, and saying like, oh man, you know, my parents couldn't give that to me when I was a kid, so now that I can afford to do it, you know, regardless of whether or not the kids are doing well in school, or whether or not they've done their chores, you know, especially around the holiday time, like we get into this mentality of, oh, well, let's just get it for them. And it's like, nah, like I'm really, regardless of the holiday, have you earned it? Is this something that you have earned? Have you earned the opportunity to do so? And if not, then now is not the time for you to get it. Okay? So you setting your financial boundaries, again, every person is different, but it is totally up to you to say yes or no. And if you're the type of person that struggles with saying no, I actually did another episode very, very early on. It may have been, you know, within the first 5 to 10 episodes. I'll put it as reference in the notes, and it is the power of saying no, because saying no is a very, very powerful tool. But don't feel guilty when you do say no. Don't feel guilty about setting your boundaries, physical or financial. And if a person challenges you on that, don't feel the need that you have to defend yourself, because no means no. Okay. If there's another subject that you would like to discuss, please let me know. And I would also like to see if there are any of you who would be brave enough to actually do a coaching session for 1 hour on the podcast. Brave enough, 1 hour, you and I, we're gonna, go over your assessment and just talk about a challenge or a goal that you like to accomplish and how we would approach it. So if that's something that you're interested in, hit me in the comments or send me an email, hit me on social media and just say, I'm interested in on-air coaching, and I'd be more than happy to share that experience with you. This is The Thinking Effect, where we help you do your daily best.